Hi, it's Sai, and in today's video I have a complete settings guide for you that you need to be running on Battlefield if you're using a controller, and also if you want to change some graphics settings for your PC. However, the controller settings are completely universal through PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox, whatever you might be using is completely universal, and I really hope this helps because it's going to make your aim so much more precise, so much steadier, and also make you move so much smoother. So yeah, without further ado, let's check out these settings. So to start with, we are going to go straight into our controller settings. Now this is for good reason. The menus are still a little bit messy and most of the settings you need are actually in this controller tab. Apart from obviously things like graphics and motion blur, etc. like that, I will get to that. So for starters, let's go on edit settings. Now, once you go into the controllers and you go into edit settings, I'm going to start with the infantry, and you want to click on this right here, this controller settings, where it says edit. Press X and it will pop up with this menu or this list, and this is some of your most important settings for your infantry. Now, a lot of this that you change will transfer over to the vehicles and things. However, we will hop on over to them as there are a few key differences between them. And once you change this and your ground vehicles, the rest should actually automatically update itself. So yeah, for starters, let's get straight into this infantry settings. First of all, you've got infantry aim sensitivity. I personally prefer 55. It's quite fast, I will say that. However, I feel like for smoothness, you need it a little bit quicker than what you would normally go to, as the game is a little bit of a slower game. And I prefer it 55, it feels a bit more fluid. However, if you're finding it too fast, try 50. I wouldn't go much lower than 40, otherwise you will feel really sluggish. And I feel like a lot of the time, aim sensitivity is pretty much personal preference. So yeah, try 50 to start with. If it's too fast, I'd probably knock it down to around 40. If it's too slow, find a middle ground. That is just the same. Field of view, another important setting. When you're using controller, anything over a 110 can make targets look super small, and they looks like grain of dust basically in the distance. All this does is basically zoom you out from the gun, so you have more of a peripheral vision around you, which is very important when playing an effort like a first-person shooter game. If someone comes to your right, you can see them a little bit better. However, using anything higher than a 110 will make things from distance look super small. So I wouldn't go any higher than sort of 115, and I wouldn't go any lower than 110. Use 110 if you're just looking for a middle ground. Use 110. These are both the same, I believe, out of the box, so just keep them the same, 56 and 80. Now, uniform infantry aiming, this is actually on as default. However, you want this turned off. Now, I'll get into this a bit further down in this list, because you can adjust all of the ADS sensitivities individually for each optic type or each optic zoom, to be honest, and it makes it feel so much better. This basically does it automatically. So if you have this turned on, it basically does it automatically, where once you go down to like a 1 optic, it'll make it a bit slower. If you go up to a 10 times optic, it'll make it a bit faster for tracking objects. However, doing that I felt like using red dots was still too fast, and using a sniper was still too slow. So I have you with every individual setting for this further down on the list. So turn this off and trust the process. This is 100 for the aim assist. You need that on controller. Aim assist slowdown, as you can see on screen right now. This is basically where your aim will slow down as you go over a target or over targets. And it basically makes it more precise, meaning that you can have more control when aiming at a target, because it will automatically slow it down for you. And then infantry aim assist zoom snap. This on the beta was actually set at 40, quite low. Essentially what this is when you ADS, it will snap onto the target, and sometimes what you can find is you'll snap onto a target behind where you're actually wanting to aim. However, in this full game, it's not as strong. So keep it on 100, try it out for a good few games, see if you can get used to it. If you can't, I'd probably knock it down to around 60, and if it's still too much, knock it down to around 40. However, I have found for the best for the full release at the moment is 100. Infantry aim input curve, Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 4 is the best one to use. Standard feels a little bit horrible, a little bit sluggish. So Battlefield 4 is what you want on there. Standard for your aim input curve for the zoom, and then your stick input acceleration preset, you want Battlefield 4, Battlefield 3, and BFBC setting. This might show different on controller, but just make sure Battlefield 4 is showing in each list on both of these settings for the aim input curve and the acceleration. As long as you've got Battlefield 4 on them, you are a-okay. Make sure your left and right acceleration is on 12. I'm not sure why, but this has just been sort of universally discovered right now, and 12 seems to be the best. If this changes in the future, then I will update you all. However, put it on 12 and it will feel absolutely perfect. Not really changed much on this bit, on the movement, apart from the crouch toggle sprint. Basically what this does is once I go into a sprint and I press crouch, it will slide me and I will stay in that crouch position regardless of what happens next. So if I slide into the crouch, I stay in the crouch position. I don't stand back up. Whereas if you have this on default, you'll slide crouched and you'll stand back up afterwards. So if you slide into cover, stand back up when you're getting aimed at, you will die. So I strongly suggest changing this and getting used to being able to stay crouched once you have slid, because it will help you out in them gunfights where you have to slide into cover that perhaps is a little bit lower than a wall or something. And then the double tap crouch for sprint slide, I have this off. I don't want to have to double tap my crouch. I want to just be able to tap the crouch while I'm sprinting and instantly slide. So this will just make things feel a bit more responsive and a little bit quicker. So yeah, turn this off and you'll be able to just single tap your crouch while you're sprinting and it will make you slide. So yeah, makes it much smoother. And then we get into the zoom. Now this is where the uniform infantry aiming stuff comes in to effect. So as long as you've turned off infantry aiming aiming, this is basically what you need to change. Now zoom I have on L1 because I actually zoom in with L1 as opposed to L2, but I will go over that in just a second. These are the same. Infantry zoom aim assist sensitivity, I would put this on 86. It's just been universally found again to be the best, and it suits it very well. Zoom transition sensitivity smoothing, have this off with uniform aiming off, because this feels horrible and it basically just doesn't feel very good. You can turn it on while you've got infantry aiming disabled, however turn it off, it doesn't feel very good at all. So this is where things will be affected if you turn off uniform aiming. Essentially, these will be on all 100 to start with, because uniform aiming, what it does, it keeps everything the same, and then depending on what scope you choose or what scope you pick up, it will automatically adjust to that scope. So everything will probably be 100, and it basically means you can build muscle memory to allow you to sort of get more precision. However, it's still too quick, it feels very horrible, and this way, by turning it off and changing all these individually, you can have much more precision, be more precise, especially at close range and long range. So 1 to 2 times zooms you want set at 75. This will just slow down the aim enough so that you're not feeling sluggish, but you still have so much precision. Anything from a 2 to a 4 you want on 80. This is because you're a little bit more zoomed in and it will feel a lot slower at this range. So yeah, 80, giving it that extra 5 just allows it to feel the same as if it was set to 75 for the lower zooms. And then again, you want 4.5 to 6, 100, they are just default. And then you want 8 to 10 as 110. And anything over that will be set to 110 as well, because you've put this 10 times zoom aim sensitivity as 110. Basically, all this allows is it to be a bit faster than standard so that you can track targets. Otherwise, you will struggle to track targets that are sort of running away, as you will be slower at aiming as they are to running. So yeah, make sure them two are on 110, and this will give you so much more precision. Come back to this video and put down if this actually helped, because it massively helped me and a lot of people aren't talking about it. Now in here, all of this is the same apart from prioritize interact. I think that's default anyway, but I have prioritize interact. It's just the way I play games. It's just the way I play Warzone. You know, it's the way I'll play the Battle Royale so I can pick things up quicker. But yeah, prioritize interact is what you want there. All of that is the same. That is the same. The only thing I have disabled is the flick look, and that is just because I don't like it. This is where you can press a button and it instantly flicks from one look to the back or from the side to the side. I don't like it. I haven't really found that I've needed it in this game, and yeah, it probably could help if you was getting shot in the back and you wanted to quickly turn, but I just do that because I have a far higher sensitivity anyway, so I just do that automatically. This is for if you like using a slower sense and you can't spin as fast. So yeah, definitely turn this off. I don't know why you would need it, so yeah, turn that off. And then going down to our ground vehicles, all you want to do is basically check that everything is the same as listed above in the infantry. However, there are a few little differences, so I will just scroll through them. So you've got 55 for the sense. I have my field of view for the vehicles in 83. It only goes up to 83. They haven't made this any higher for some reason. I'm not sure why. I feel like it could do with being 100, but there you go. 83 is the highest you can go. So that basically will zoom you out when you're in third person and give you so much more sort of scope for seeing around you. They're on the same vehicle aim ratio on 56. Uniform vehicle aiming is actually on for the vehicles because you don't have individual zooms for scopes and things like that, so I kept that on. And then you want this coefficients at 178. Again, just a uniform thing, feels really good. This should already be on Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 4 from previous. However, just make sure that they are actually set to what you see right here. The only thing that is different is the left and right acceleration is on 20 as opposed to 12, so make sure that is changed. And then the rest of this, I believe, is the same. Again, I just switched that from L2 to L1, so you just ignore that for a second. Gyro button, I just have that, just whatever it is, standard, just leave it on standard. And then, because you're not actually going to use it. And then flick look again, I just have disabled. I'm not going to need to flick look in a tank, so yeah, just disable it. And then all you need to do from there is make sure transport vehicles are all the same. And just basically go down the list, make sure your aircraft control settings are the same, make sure your helicopter control settings are the same, and make sure your gunner is the same. Now, once you've got them down, we'll come back to the button layout. Once you've got them down, for more control tuning of your controller, you want to scroll all the way to the bottom of that list and go on controller tuning. Press X and it will bring up another list. This is what I said about the menus being a bit confusing. Basically in here you will find some very important settings to fine tune the controller. Controller vibration, you want to turn it off and put intensity down to 0, so just in case it doesn't work. Turn it off. I find that vibration just feels horrible. You're going to be getting vibration from when you're shooting, when you're getting blown up, things like that. So just turn that off and it'll feel so much better. Now, the other thing that I haven't seen people talk about is this adaptive trigger weapon fire. Basically, what this will do is it will determine automatically via what gun you're using how far you have to press your trigger down to actually get a bullet fired in the game. I found that it was a bit horrible. Personally, I can't use it anyway because I have mouse click buttons, but with another controller I tested, it doesn't feel very good at all, and it makes the game feel less responsive. So I set them to 0-0, and this means that basically you're going to be able to press and have no adaptive trigger at all. So if you like that, obviously then take them down to 0. If you don't like it, keep them as default, or if you want the intensity to be a bit less, lower them down. But I suggest for a more responsive first person shooter experience, turning them all the way to 0, and that really comes into its own in just a second. So now you've got some very important settings, the dead zones, and these are for your left stick and right stick, so things like aiming and moving forward. So your left stick is obviously the one you use for moving forward. You want dead zone set to 2 and your dead zone axial set to 3. Basically, the lower you have this, the less input you have to put onto the controller forward or backwards, etc., to actually get a response in the game. This by default is quite high. You have to push your controller really far to get a response, and it feels less responsive in the actual game. So put this down to 2. If you start getting stick drift in the game, basically where you start moving automatically when you're not touching your controller, then just higher it up by 0.5 each time. So as you can see, you can change this just individually. Change it 0.5 each time until you've stopped moving, and then that will be perfect. But as I say, you want this number as low as possible. So I started with 2, and that is what I found just works absolute treat. Then as I say, 3 for the axial. Max input threshold, you want to lower this down. I've seen a lot of people keeping this on 100. However, keep this on 100 and your game will feel less responsive and just feel horrible. Put it on 60. Basically what it means is I don't have to now move this very far forward or backwards to actually get my character to move forward or backwards in the game. It feels so much more responsive. Set it to 60 and you will thank me later. Now, the right stick for the aiming and shooting and sort of your ADS aiming and stuff, you want it on 2 and 3 again, just so that you don't have to move it as much. Again, if you get stick drift in this one, just keep moving this up 0.5 until it stops, and that will be golden. However, the only one you want to keep the same is the max input threshold. Now, basically all this is doing is giving you maximum movement in that stick. The reason you want maximum movement in this stick and not that stick is because this one is for your aiming. So if you're aiming left and then someone comes from your right, you want maximum movement in that stick to be able to get to them as fast as possible. So keep that on 100. Now, then we get into dead zones for your triggers, and this is actually something that is very, very good if you don't have mouse click triggers or you just use L2 and R2. Essentially what this means is if you put this down to 0 and put this down to 5, you don't have to press your trigger in as far to actually get a response from firing in the game. So this removes some sort of responsiveness in terms of your reaction time, because there's less time delay in between you pressing the button and it firing on screen. So make sure they are as low as you can possibly go, even if you have mouse click buttons like I do, because you will get a more responsive feel out of your controller. And that is everything for your controller tuning. So if we hop back out of this menu, what we are going to look at is your controller like mappings. So as I say, I shoot with L1 and R1, and if you want to do that, you have to flip anything that was originally L2 and R2 to L1 and R1, and anything that was L1 R1 to R2 and L2. So it's a bit confusing, however I will show you just so you get the gist. So essentially you have to go down here, find your fire and zoom, flip them to R1 and L1 just by clicking on them, binding it. You will get this message, however just ignore that because that is for something completely different. Bind anyway, and then you'll have your bind for zoom on L1 and your fire for R1, just like that. And then anything in this list that is originally L2 or R2, you need to sorry, L1 or R1, you need to flip over to L2 and R2. So originally the grenade was L1, however I have flipped this to L2 obviously because now I'm firing with L1. So if I press my fire, it would throw a grenade. So you need to make sure you essentially just flip everything round, and you only need to do that for your infantry settings. The rest of them I haven't really changed. However, what I will suggest is you copy these down, because in this game you have a method of driving that is using your stick as opposed to using your L2 and R2 to brake and accelerate, which feels horrible because you have to use your helicopter to yawn and stuff like that with your stick, and also go up and down, and it makes driving the helicopters, makes driving vehicles so much of a pain and so much of a hassle. I don't know why they've gone with this system, however they have. So all you want to do is go down and copy these. For your ground vehicles, make sure it is on alternate for buttons and default for the driving. This will make sure you have your R2 as accelerate and your L2 as brake. And then you want to go down and keep transport vehicles default, because by default they are L2 and R2 for acceleration and brake anyway. And then your aircraft you want on alternate and default. This will make sure that you can go up and down using your left, your L2 and R2 as opposed to your thumbstick. You can now just go up and down using them buttons and control your actual movement using your analog stick. So it makes driving aircraft so much easier. Helicopter, the same thing, alternate and default. It does the exact same thing like I just said for the aircraft. Gunner, now I have this on custom. However, if you're just using L2 and R2 to fire, Make sure this is just on default, as it is the same. And then basically the reason why it's on custom for me is because I've switched. If we scroll down right here, I've switched to R1 fire and L1 zoom. This is because I fire with R1 with my infantry, so I want to make sure that everything is just universal. That is the only change that I have made. By default, they will be R2 and L2, so you can just leave the sticks onto default and default. The UI control mapping that was down here, I haven't really changed anything on here. Obviously, I've just changed them because I changed my firing. And you don't need to touch it if you haven't changed your R2 or L2. The joystick, obviously, you don't need. And that is everything for your controller settings. Now, going out of that, you want to go into your graphics settings, and then you want to change a few things in here. So, obviously, if you're on PC, you can change all of your graphics settings, and I'm pretty sure you can do them on console, but don't take that to heart because I actually don't know. But if you're on PC, copy these graphics settings, as this will make sure you have the highest FPS possible while the game looks good, the game looks sharp, and yeah, you don't need everything on high to make this game look good. It is very, very optimized, so just make sure that these are copied. Just pause the video right now and yeah, just copy them down. That way, obviously, this will say custom. World brightness, I would just keep on 50 personally. I put it on 51 just because my monitor is a little bit bright in the bright areas, a little bit dull in the dull areas, so I put it on 51 just to trial it, but I'd keep it on 55. It is pretty good out of the box. UI brightness, I've just kept that on 50. Sharpness, I've put up to 52, just added a little bit more sharpness into the game just to make it look that much better because we've changed some of the settings to low. So yeah, sharpness 52. Then if you click on advanced, the only thing in here that you want to change is make sure this is on DLSS. This is basically going to give you more FPS in the game, and it also just looks better. And then I've just put the overlay to simple. This is basically, as you can see in the top right corner right there, the green is basically my CPU FPS, you know, GPU, stuff like that. So yeah, that is all that is. If you don't want that on, simply just turn that off. And then you want to make sure this NVIDIA Reflex Low Latency is on enabled plus boost. That will give you, again, better FPS. However, if you find you're lagging a little bit, just flick it to enabled. And if you find you're lagging on enabled, try enabled plus boost. Very much a PC sort of specific thing, individual PC specific thing rather. So yeah, just give that a go and see which one works best for you. Personally, I've not had any issues on enabled plus boost. That it is naturally on, so yeah, I just kept it on that. Then scrolling down from there, obviously you can see you've got some of the same settings again that we've already covered. Weapon field of view, you want on wide. This will basically make sure you can see more again. Weapon motion blur, world motion blur, and camera shaker mount. Make sure these are slid all the way to the left. These two on 0 and this one on 50. The motion blur is obviously what it says on the tin. It is the motion blur for your weapon, and the world looks awful, feels awful. Some people actually get sick from that, and I personally do get motion sickness. So yeah, make sure they are as low as possible, and you can actually turn them off fully. However, the shaker mount you can't turn off fully. This is just for immersive purposes in the game. When you're getting blown up and things, your camera will shake a little bit. However, you don't want it on full, as it will affect your aim. So put this down to 50 and your aim will be so much better while explosions are going off, etc., or you're jumping and stuff like that. Reduce sprint camera bobbing. Make sure this is on. This is off by default, and when you're running, your gun will be swaying and bobbing up and down, and it just looks horrible. It means that when you're running and then you want to aim at something, you actually aim somewhere different because your gun is bouncing up and down. And there is another setting to help with this as well, which I will show you. And yeah, make sure this is on, because this reduces the amount that bobs up and down during the game and makes it look a lot better. Make sure these are all off, these three at the bottom, your aberration, your vignette, and your film grain, because that will make the game just look a lot cleaner, a lot more organized, and less clutter, because basically all these are for is cinematic purposes. So yeah, just turn them off. And then obviously I use borderless, but make sure that is on full screen for yourself. Make sure it's on the correct monitor if you're playing on PC. If you are playing on PC, make sure this setting is turned off, your vertical sync, as it will massively hinder your game's frame rate and your FPS. So yeah, make sure that is turned off. You do not need it on. HUD motion I have off, vehicle HUD motion I have off as well. This is purely just down to the fact I don't want my minimap and that shaking while I'm running or driving a vehicle. I like things to be stationary so I know where they are, and it also makes the game, again, just look a lot cleaner. The rest of this haven't really changed. If we click on advanced HUD settings, I have put the HUD padding to 4. It is naturally 0. This is basically your border for how far things are in the center of the screen. So if it's on 0, it's going to be like tight to the sort of corners of your screen as possible. If you add a little bit into it, it is going to be a little bit more in the middle. And I'm actually going to boost that up to 5 right now while we talk about it, because I like my minimap to be sort of where I don't have to take my eye too far off the center of the screen. Minimap size I've got on medium. Standard I think is small, but I like it on medium just so that I can see a lot more, and it is a bit more sort of in my face when I'm looking for red dots and things. The rest of this I don't think I've changed. The compass I've taken off just to make it look cleaner. Personally, I never call out the compass, but if you are a person that likes calling out from the compass, you know, whether they're at 206 or north or south or whatever, then just keep it on. But yeah, and you can change the opacity of it actually there, so if you want it to look a little less blatant on the screen, change the opacity and keep it on. Change the tank HUD colors and things here. I've not changed them. And then vehicle control hints I've turned off. Show HUD prompts, I've got that on. Basically that is to just show you what button you need to click for certain things. Sometimes I forget, but yeah, you can turn that off if you want a cleaner look, but yeah, I would just leave that on. And then if you go back to your graphics settings and scroll back down to where you was, you actually come into your HUD settings, which we've already gone over, and then you go over to icons and indicators. Now, icon intensity I have toned down to 52. It's just to make them look a bit less blatant in the game. I can still see them, however they're not so vibrant. HUD icons, essentially I've turned off ping hints in here. Don't think I've really done anything else. I think that's why it was showing the change. Yeah, I've not done anything else in there. So again, let's go back to the icons. The most important thing you want to change here is in your crosshair and indicators. Basically, I've changed my crosshair color. This is white by default. However, you can change it to whatever color you want using this sort of RGB scale right here. And I've put pink because, as you can see on the right hand side in the pictures, it stands out no matter the color of the background. So change it to something obscure like pink. Pink I found is the best. Blue works really well as well. So yeah, whatever you think stands out personally to your eyes, yeah, that is the best way to go. White I always feel just gets lost in bright and it's just horrible. Now, crosshair thickness, this is small. This is default, obviously. Naturally, you can change it to thin. However, I put it on thick. This is just because there is no actual option to make the center dot bigger. Not that I've found anyway, to make the center dot bigger than it actually is. So I put the crosshair thickness on thick just to make that center dot a bit bigger so that I can see it more in game, because it's very important to know where you're aiming when you're coming around corners and things where you expect people to be. So yeah, very important to put that on thick. It will help you a lot, I actually really think. And then this is the most important one in here. If you don't change anything else, just make sure you change this, the infantry crosshair projection. This is where it will try and project where it thinks that you are going to shoot when your camera shakes and things. However, if you turn this off, your stationary center dot will just stay there the whole time and won't move. So you'll be able to always find center because it won't move. It won't be shaking all over the screen like it would if crosshair projection was on. And then hit indicator intensity, I've just put down a 50. Headshot color, I've turned to something obscure so that I know if I hit a headshot, I know that I can re-engage or whatever. So yeah, I've put pink, change it to whatever color you want. You can change all of these colors if you really want. Hit indicator number opacity, I've turned down to 60 so that it's not too blatant in my face. That is on small. And then yeah, you can change the infantry damage color and also vehicle damage color down here as well. Now, if we scroll all the way back down, I do believe that is it for all of that. Yeah, this is just chat settings. And then if you want to actually change some more of your custom color settings, what you can do is click on accessibility. A lot of these settings are all the same, but you can go on to this graphics quality settings. You can click color profiles and you can change all of the colors right here for everything. So you've got player color, friendly color, squad color, enemy color. Now, I haven't changed the color of these. However, what I have done is I've gone on here and I basically, when you first click on it, it will come up with that color, and then you can just slide them all the way to the right hand side, making them more vibrant and more visible in the game. That is the only thing I have done right there. I believe camera effects we've already been over, yeah, and everything else in this category is just the same as what we have already been over. So as I say, that is where it gets a little bit complicated. Same for gameplay. Gameplay should all just be the same. However, just go across and just check that everything. Roll camera in landing I have off because I don't really like the camera spinning on me. It just makes me feel a bit queasy. Double tap crouch for sprint. Obviously, we've already gone through all of that. We've already gone through all of this, and I believe all of this is just the same. Yes, it is. So then if we go down to the audio settings, this is what I have for audio. I've toned down the sound effects because the explosions were really loud. Music I have off because of content. Commander voiceovers I put on 70, and the soldier voiceovers, this I've toned down. It was just so strong and so loud in my ears. Controller speaker volume, I don't want anything coming through my controller. I don't need it. I use headphones. I put the audio in background off. This is only when you're switching tabs, so it doesn't really matter for use. Push to talk I have on my microphone. I have it just set to one of my keys on my keyboard. I could really do with a foot pedal so that I could press the foot pedal and talk. However, I don't have one at the moment, so that is what I use. This I've not changed. The subtitle settings, I've literally just turned the subtitles off. I don't need them. Might turn them back on for campaign. I don't know, but yeah. Radio music in the cars I've turned off. This is just so that I can hear more when in the game, and so that the music isn't playing while I am recording or streaming for content reasons. However, you can keep that on. That is personal preference, and you can even tone them down if you really wanted to. I believe that is absolutely everything for your controller, your gameplay, your graphics. With these controller settings, you will get more responsiveness out of the game. And yeah, we've been through all of that. And yeah, that is absolutely everything. So I hope this really helped. I know it's a long video, however, I hope it helped. And yeah, I hope to catch you on the battlefield. See ya!